This is Gretchen, the Verdant Crafter. Today I'm going to be showing you 10 cards I made using the Simon Says Stamp October 2017 card kit. This card kit was called Brushstroke Messages. I actually made 12 cards because I made 2 cards with my scraps and I lost 1 card, which I then found. We have the Brushstroke Messages stamp set that was designed for this card kit. We have 4 pieces of paper. We have 2 cream metallic envelopes. We have an embossing pen from Ranger. We have some multimedia mat, this little glue applicator, detail glue brush. It's very fine and it's great for applying glue to small areas. You can clean it off between uses and you can get a lot of use from it. You also got this fantastic little die, which is very delicate and it matches the theme of the paper. I love this paper. It had cream, gold, and this navy Prussian blue, and the gold is a rose gold color, which is really fantastic. One side of each piece of paper had gold foiling on it. And we also got some embossing powder from Simon Says Stamp. This is navy embossing powder, and it has a great shine. Jumping right into our first card, this is pretty simple. So I cut out a piece of paper that is 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches. I also cut a small piece of the rose gold mirror burnished cardstock, and I'm going to be stamping, sorry, my cat's playing at the door, a sentiment. I believe I stamped "Just wanted to say you're amazing." I used this sentiment on most of the cards because I do like to tell people that they are amazing, that they're awesome, that they're fantastic, that they're perfect. We all need to hear good things about ourselves. And it's something that is pretty easy to do. I am going to glue down this burnished cardstock onto a small piece of paper. This is wider, but not as long as the paper with my sentiment. And I'm using foam tape to pop up the sentiment. I'm originally going to apply it to the center of the card, but I'm going to peel it up and apply it to the top third of the card. I think that looks very nice, and it's a little bit more pleasing to my eye rather than having it straight in the middle because it is such a small sentiment. I am going to be taping that down to the navy cardstock that came in the kit. This is Simon Says Stamp's soft navy cardstock. I did score it at, or cut it at 4 1/4 inches and then score it at 5 1/2 inches. Here I'm going to be using some of the Rosewater Nuvo drops. These are fantastic, and if you don't have some, I would highly recommend them. They are translucent when they dry, and they really accented the colors in this card kit. I also love that with Nuvo drops you can make them any size that you want, and you can even make them different shapes, although I think the translucent ones, the jewel drops, do have a tendency to crack more than the other Nuvo drops. Here's our finished card. Moving on to card number 2. This was a fairly simple card, so I'm going to stamp the sentiment, "Just wanted to say you're amazing," and I'm going to emboss that with the navy steel navy embossing powder from Simon Says Stamp. I love that it does have that gloss to it. For the paper, I have that the Prussian blue type paper with the rose gold stripes, cut to 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches. I prefer that size when I'm making cards like this because it does leave a nice border around the edge when you put it onto an A2 size card. Here I'm going to use foam tape to pop up one of the banners. These are all banners that I cut from leftover cardstock. And here I'm adding 1 layer of foam tape on one side of this banner and 2 layers on the other, so it's popped up above all of the other banners. Here I'm going to be applying my card to the ivory card base. And there we go. I am going to curl up the edges of the banners a little to give it a little bit more movement. If I thought about it more, I wouldn't have applied tape to the bottom of the banners so that I could get more movement out of them. I am once again applying the Rosewater Nuvo drops. I was thinking about applying some navy Nuvo drops, but I felt like they didn't quite match the Prussian blue, that green blue that was in the paper, although I love that color. When I used to do oil paintings, it was definitely the blue that I would reach to for first. Moving on to card number 3, this was definitely not my favorite card, but it was a fun card to make. I'm using one of the long brush strokes to stamp a grid pattern using some Altenew ink. I felt like this ink matched the paper pretty well. It didn't match as well as I would have liked, but it worked. Here I'm using the thinner brush stroke to stamp grids within the grid. And now I'm going to use my Quickie glue pen to trace or draw lines along the paper. I let that dry, and now I'm just going to burnish in some rose gold foiling. Here I'm using a thicker Nuvo glue pen to do the same thing. You can see here that I really am just burnishing that in. I like the rose gold on top because it adds just some nice color and interest. Here I have my smoke cardstock, and I traced the edges with pencil so I knew where things lined up. Here I'm adding some double-sided tape. This is, I believe, 1/4 of an inch or maybe 1/8 of an inch. And I'm just applying, once again, the foil that I got. This is rose gold foil, and I'm sure that you can find something online like it. It's great. It would work with the laminator, but I felt like I wanted to use glue and tape because that felt easier to use. Here I'm stamping You Are Loved, and I'm stamping little brushstroke heart. I emboss those with the Steel Navy embossing powder. I'm adding a little banner to the end, and I'm going to glue that down onto the paper, which, by the way, I popped up with some fun foam to add a little bit of dimension. There I'm cutting that off with a scissors so that it's flush with the edge of the paper. While this is a very pink card, I do think you could probably get away with giving it to a guy. Of course, it's all about knowing who you're giving it to. Here I'm adding some of the navy Nuvo drops, and I'm also going to add some of the Rosewater Nuvo drops. The navy worked really well with the navy color that I used from Altenew. I believe I used sapphire and Prussian blue as the two colors that I stamped with. Moving on to card number 4. I really like this card. So I used my Quickie glue pen to draw all over the flowers and add lots of little dots around. I set that aside and let it dry, and then I burnished in the foil. So I created basically, like that first card, I created another piece of paper like that. Here I'm stamping my sentiment using VersaFine ink, and I heat emboss that. Again, it's just wanted to say you're amazing. Here I'm using a Zig 2-way glue pen to trace or draw flowers, leaves, and dots. And again, I let that dry, and then I put on a piece of rose gold foiling. I am going to burnish that in. The great thing with using a bone folder is as you're burnishing it, you're going to see that where it has stuck to the glue, it really comes off. I think it's really pretty. It's not the most elegant, but I like that it accents the paper. Here is my sentiment. I did put that on a larger piece of sort of the Prussian blue colored paper, and around the edge I traced with my Quickie glue pen, and I added some more of the gold foiling. Here I'm adding some of the Rosewater Nuvo drops, just as little sprays around there. This would be an easy card to make again. I probably wouldn't add the piece of navy cardstock in the back with the flowers, but you can if you want. Here I'm using some Simon Says stamp, I believe it's Deep Sea ink. This really matched the color of the green blue that's in the cardstock better than the Altenew inks I was using. I did stamp it on my card base because I knew I wouldn't see that once I covered it, and I wanted to test to make sure that it was the right color. Unfortunately, I think I stamped that a little crooked. Maybe I didn't, I'm not sure. There, I popped it up with some Fun Foam and added some of the Rosewater Nouveau drops. That was a really simple card. Here we're moving on to card number 6. I am cutting apart my stamps so that I can stamp You're Awesome. You could obviously do this with some masking, but I felt it was easier to cut them apart. It is very easy to cut apart stamps like this, and it's very easy to put them back together because they do fit together so well. I'm using the Steel Navy embossing powder from Simon Says Stamp. I heat set that, and I added some Fun Foam to the back of this and used some double-sided tape to stick it down onto my ivory card base. I thought about using some of these flowers that I cut out using the fancy die, or the die that came with this card set, the spiral flower wafer thin die, but I decided against it. I stuck with what is becoming the classic Rosewater Nouveau drops. I love this paper. It was so much fun to work with, and it's so beautiful. I would definitely buy it again, and I did buy similar paper from My Mind's Eye at a store when I was there. We're on to card number 7. For my base, I'm using the Tonic Matte that's pretty new, and I'm using a bunch of the different brush strokes and Distress ink from Tim Holtz, or Ranger Distress ink, to stamp these brush strokes. I have Ranger watercolor paper that I've just misted with water. And here I'm stamping a whole bunch of different brush strokes. I'm using Iced Spruce, I'm using Chipped Sapphire, and I'm using Walnut Stain. I'm just going to alternate the colors and the brush strokes. Here I have them covering the page, and I sprayed some more water on it to make sure that the colors really bled and mixed together. I am going to heat set that a little bit with my heat gun. I'm sorry that string is hanging there. Normally I have it tucked up, but I changed my camera setup a little to try and make things easier to use, and obviously I missed some things. I am going to set this aside to dry, and I don't show you everything about this card because, well, I lost it for a while. So here I'm going to stamp Just Wanted to Say You're Amazing, that classic sentiment that everyone should hear, if not daily, at least once or twice a week. I'm going to glue that down to my cardstock. In this case, I'm using glue because I really want it to stick to the cardstock. The reason that I actually lost this card was I put it underneath a basket that I used to hold scrap paper, and I knew I had it somewhere, but I couldn't find it. Here you can see the finished card that I found right when I was editing, and I did add some oyster gray, which are clear translucent gray jewel drops. Card number 8 is very similar to card number 7. This time, instead of stamping on wet watercolor paper, I'm stamping on dry watercolor paper. I'm alternating between, I believe it's Seedless Preserves, Cracked Pistachio, and Picked Raspberry, and Blueprint Sketch. Blueprint Sketch and Chipped Sapphire are definitely my 2 favorite Distress ink colors. I go back to them the most often. Once again, I'm just alternating which type of brush stroke I use, how I position it, and the colors. When I am using that long, thin brush stroke, I usually stamp it twice, not on top of each other, but just offset a little so that it gets a little bit more dimension and that it's a little easier to see. I am very deliberately overlapping some of the colors so that when I get this wet, the colors will blend more. And I am sticking to one side of the paper just because I think that adds a little bit more interest. I will say recently on Instagram, I saw someone using a different stamp set, and certainly not this technique, but they stamped a whole bunch of colors, soft colors diagonally across the paper, and then I think they stamped the sentiment diagonally on top of that, and it looked fantastic. I definitely plan on doing that sometime with this stamp set. Here I got my whole page wet with water, and I'm tilting it so that the color stays more on the color side rather than going into the white side. Finally, I'm adding some shimmer spritz just to add a little bit more shimmer to these colors. I think they're really fun and summery. I'm sopping up some of the excess color, and I'm going to use my heat gun to dry this. Here, now that it's dry, I'm using my anti-static powder tool, and I'm going to stamp my sentiment on top, and I am going to emboss that with the Steel Navy embossing powder. I did use my anti-static powder tool all over this because I wasn't sure where I was going to stamp it. And I stamped thank you. I don't think you can ever have too many thank you cards. I am probably going to try and make thank you cards for all of my students for Thanksgiving because I'm sure some of them don't get thanked enough for being themselves. And, you know, it's something that I would have liked to get. Treat others as you would be treated. Now I've switched to the White Blizzard Nuvo drops. These are translucent. They dry clear, but they have glitter in them. So they are really fantastic. One of the things I love about Nuvo drops is if you put them on something that's water-based, such as Distress ink, they will pick up the color of whatever you put them on. Although that's also something I hate about them. You can use, I believe, something like Distress Microglaze, which is sort of an waxy oil. It's not really a wax oil, but you can put it on. It feels a little like petroleum jelly, and that will just protect what you're putting on it. This card is inspired a little bit by Jennifer McGuire and a card she made quite a few years ago. I'm stamping a whole bunch of hearts with Distress ink, and I am using rainbow colors because I felt like that would be fun. I am overlapping some of them, and I'm using, I believe, Squeezed Lemonade, Carved Pumpkin, Candied Apple, Blueprint Sketch, Purple Seedless Preserves, Mowed Lawn, and yeah, I think those are the colors. Here, I'm just spritzing it with water. I'm letting the colors blend together and bleed, and I am going to hit it with my heat gun. I love that the colors for this really stayed very vibrant and true. You can see that I really let it sit there for a little bit. I think I let it sit there for a minute, maybe 2 minutes, before I did anything to it. So once this is dry, I'm going to stamp with my VersaFine ink. You're going to rock this. I think it would have been smarter to stamp that with VersaFine, dry it, and then stamp around it so that the colors from the hearts aren't directly behind it. But I love this card. It was so much fun. It's so simple, and I'm definitely going to make more like this. I am using Fun Foam to pop this up. Just some double-sided tape on the Fun Foam, and here we're putting it onto a white A2 card base. I did cut down this piece of cardstock, my hearts, to 4 inches by 5¼ inches. I did that with both of the Brushstroke cards that I made as well. Here I'm using the Nuvo Blizzard, the clear glittered Nuvo dots. Again, I am very deliberately putting some of these on the white so that they stay clear, and some of them on the color so that they'll pick up the color of the heart behind them. This is definitely one of my favorite cards. And it's totally different from the colors of the card kit, but it's so much fun. Now we're moving on to card number 10. I am using some glue dots, and I cut out a bunch of these flowers that were in the pieces of cardstock as well as the leaves. I'm putting them together with glue dots so that I can layer them up with my sentiment later. And I'm using one of my favorite pieces of paper. I love this theme of having a, Prussian blue stripe, a pink stripe, the cream stripe, and somewhere on there, the rose gold foiling. And I have to say, I never really understood rose gold foiling, why someone would like rose gold so much. And it must be because I'd never really seen it, or I'd never seen such nice rose gold foiling or rose gold, because I love this. I'm definitely going to be getting more rose gold stuff because it's so pretty. I did stamp, just wanted to say you're amazing, but I felt like I stamped it crooked. So I stamped it on a piece of the burnished rose gold mirror cardstock. I embossed it with the soft navy embossing powder, and I'm going to pop that up with some, I think it's foam. And, you know, I got the sentiment crooked. I think I cut the paper crooked, but it's okay. I'm going to layer those flowers and the different parts that I cut on and around it. I am using the multimedia mat that came in the kit. You may have seen that I pulled out the multimedia mat I had been using, which was empty. So I took off the tip that I put on. It is a quilling precision tip. I cleaned it just to make sure everything was nice. Some soap and water dried it, and then I put it onto the multimedia mat that came in the kit. Here I'm gluing some of the flowers down on the surface, and I'm going to pop some of the flowers up with some foam tape. If you've had a chance to use this card kit, I am going to bet that you had a lot of fun. It is such a fantastic card kit, and it really lent itself to making very simple cards, which I think sometimes get a bad rap because we think, you know, oh, you're only creative if you're making this really fancy, beautiful card, or if you're coloring something yourself, or if you're doing some watercoloring or something like that. It's certainly a mindset that I tend to get into. But these cards are so simple. They were really fast. I think the whole video, all of the recording before I did any editing was about 45 minutes. And certainly it took me longer than that because I didn't record myself doing any of the cutting or things like that. But it didn't take that long. And they were so much fun. It took so long to edit because I was giving my students AP tests, which totally stressed me out. I never took an AP class in high school. I never really wanted to. And I'm trying really hard to give them as an authentic experience as I can so that they are prepared when they actually do take the AP test. If anyone thinks that being a teacher is not stressful, I really suggest that you become a teacher because you need to understand that we work really hard to try and give our students the best experience they can. Not that I'm complaining or anything. I love my kids so much. Here is this card. And this is definitely a very simple card. I actually wish that I could have made more. Excuse the lighting. I was trying something different and obviously this didn't work. So here are the cards that I made. I'm also going to show you 2 more cards, and I'm not going to show you the first watercolor card I made because, again, I lost it. I cut my scraps into long strips, and I had a piece of A2 card paper, so 4¼ inches by 5½ inches. I put double-sided tape on that, and I layered all of these card scraps on top of it. That one I put the soft navy embossing powder. I just burnished that into the gaps that I left between them, and I heat set it. And the other I just put close together. Here's what I had left over: the burnished cardstock, the multimedia mat, a whole bunch of pieces that I cut out, the stamp set, the steel navy embossing powder, the die, a whole bunch of scraps which I used to make several more cards, and some more pieces of cardstock because I did end up going to a lot of cream card bases, which, you know, you could only get 2 from the cardstock. These are my cards. I want to thank you for watching. I had a lot of fun making these. I hope that you have a lot of fun making your cards. I hope that you are inspired. I want to let you know that you are amazing because you are. You are doing something so creative and so wonderful, and you should be proud of what you accomplish. Thank you for listening. I hope that you have a great day, and bye.